For those of you who've heard me over the last couple days, thank you for hanging out and listening to me again. I'm Misty Slater. I'm Chief of Staff for the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and I got to work with a number of Indigenous nations and people to help create an Indigenous Peoples Commitment to Relations and Trade. This is something that's so very important to the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska because we want to develop strong relationships with Indigenous people all across the globe. One, to create trustworthy relationships that we can build upon for many, many years in the future, for many, many generations. But two, so we can create economic prosperity for all of our nations, for all of our people through trade. The Iowa Tribe is increasing opportunities for trade all across the globe with the launch of our foreign trade zone and with the reinvigoration of our ancient trade routes. And in recognition of our commitment to increasing Indigenous relationships and trade, we have created this commitment that I discussed Tuesday night at dinner and should be in the attendees' email inboxes as well. With that, I would like to invite Luis to make a few comments and to sign this commitment to relations and trade. So it's the Indigenous Peoples Commitment to Relations and Trade. So first I would like to invite Luisa. Next, I would like to invite Vice Chairman Lance Foster, representing the Iowa Tribe, to sign as well. I'll also just make a quick announcement that the Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri and Kansas and Nebraska was not able to attend today, but they also signed this document in advance of the event.
And we just had this conversation with the president of the Garifuna Nation and the ambassador at large of the Garifuna Nation has been authorized to sign this commitment to relations and trade.
I'll also say if anyone else would like to, has an interest, and is able to sign on behalf of their nation or their tribal entity, please let me know and we can get your signature before I leave for the day. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining on this incredibly momentous occasion where we're signing this commitment to relationships and trade.
And also to say that this continues, we're still in continued conversation with the Omaha Nation and the other nations that have been invited, and so the conversations continues. This is not the end, but the beginning of this life-changing journey that we are taking as indigenous communities and nations.
I will now turn the microphone back over so you all can complete the program for the day. Thank you all.
Well, thank you so much, everybody who's still here. I think this has been quite a full day, just like yesterday. And for our next panel, let's see. I'm calling up Rose. So we had some shifting going on here because we had people who had to leave early. And so things were changed around. But Rose Godinez, she is with the ACLU of Nebraska, and I just want to turn it over. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Hello, everyone. My name is Rose Godinez, pronouns she, her. I am the legal director of the ACLU of Nebraska, but more importantly, I am a descendant of the Maya Quiche. Thank you. Thank you. I actually just discovered my indigeneity about less than a year ago. And so it's very momentous to even a huge honor to moderate this panel with allies, both indigenous and non-indigenous. So I would like to call the members of the panel up to the stage. Y mientras voy a interpretar un poco de lo que yo digo en español. Todo el panel no va a estar en español, pero quisiera hacer unos comentarios. Primero me llamo Rosángela Godinez, mi pronombre es ella y soy la directora legal de la ACLU de Nebraska. Es un gran privilegio estar aquí porque más importante para mí soy descendiente de los Maya Quiche y muy recientemente aprendí de mi indigeneidad, así que es un gran privilegio estar facilitando este panel. Is there a portable microphone or not? So we will start off the panel with introductions. Well, actually, before I do that, I do want to take a moment to thank my elders, which are Eulalia and Maria Gaspar, and Luis Marcos, as well as Juana, for everything they've done to ensure that the Maya Nation and the Maya culture and traditions are carried over to Omaha, Nebraska, which would not be possible without them. Solo quería tomar un momento para agradecerle a María Gaspar, a Eulalia Pedro, a Luis Marcos, a Juana, por todo lo que han hecho para traer nuestras tradiciones, nuestros rituales, nuestras creencias a un país tan lejos de la tierra de donde somos. Pero muchas gracias por todo lo que han hecho. Okay, so I will kick it off to introductions and maybe left to right. Okay, left.
Hello. I need to turn this on.
I think it's up.
Yep, mic check.
Got it?
Up.
There you go.
Right, how about now?
The light's on.
Hello.
Okay.
You just gotta,
It works for you, not for me. Okay.
you gotta put it to your mouth.
Hello, everyone. I am Tina Owens. I am honored to be here. And I want to thank you for the invitation to speak and also share my respect for being included in these conversations and this hallway, and with the great honor that has been bestowed just to even be here in these discussions with you. I can't say thank you enough. You know, Sheila talked earlier about hats, and so I thought as part of my introduction I will just very, very shortly share the different hats that I wear. So the first hat that I have is a human hat, and that hat was actually assigned to me before I was born, and it's one that's meaningful to the work that I do now. You see, I'm from Michigan. Actually, several of the things that were shown in the last video are very familiar to me. But in 1974, there was an agricultural contamination in Michigan with a forever chemical that impacted people who ate the food from that contamination in the northern part of the states of Ohio, Illinois, and Indiana, and most of lower Michigan. And both of my parents were contaminated in that. And I was born with an autoimmune disease that took me quite a while to get diagnosed and to understand what the root cause of it was. And I managed that autoimmune disease through food. And so I carry food with me everywhere I go. I am delighted to say that when I am eating from tables where Indigenous cooks have made the food, I do not have the sickness that I get when I eat food from other places. And so I cannot thank you enough for the experience to just safely consume food without having sickness come with it later. So that's hat number one. I also grew up in a town named after Chief Ticonquasha of the Potawatomi tribe. And I am from the unceded territory where the Potawatomi tribe was removed in 1833. And so this has always been a backdrop to my life that I have only recently started to really deeply pay attention to in a way that should have been taught to me from the very beginning. So that is my human hat. I'm also a farmer from a multi-generational farming and dairy family, the very conventional kind, the plow every field and cut down every tree kind. And I work in regenerative agriculture and in the organic system since 2008. So as you can imagine, our family conversations can be a little bit tense because the thousands of acres in every direction around which I grew up in and spent most of my life in are being systematically deforested by people that I'm related to. And people think of deforestation as being a somewhere else problem, and I'm here to tell you that I have watched it occur over my lifetime on a significant amount of acreage within the county in which I grew up. We raise heritage pastured animals for nutrient-dense outcomes using regenerative agriculture practices that I have learned from the scientists and the humans and the teachers and the Indigenous that I have been blessed to come across in my life. So I'm grateful to them for the wisdom they impart to me. I have worn a hat for sustainability leadership at two of the world's largest food companies and have been a media trained brand spokesperson on some of the world's largest food stages. And that is a hat that I still wear and seek to employ in service of things that really need to be done in the system going forward as it relates to sustaining human life, not making money. So that is my focus now. My day job hat is 50% of my time at a nonprofit leading the Nutrient Density Alliance to show what outcomes are of regenerative agriculture and offer it to people so they can actually access it, because I know firsthand what it means for my own health and what it means for the health of those around me to actually get nutrient-dense food. And the other half of my hat, the other half of my time in my work, I am currently paying for myself out of savings just so I can do the right damn things. Because I saw something I couldn't unsee. And that is that the methodologies that are used globally to measure greenhouse gas emissions, climate change mitigation, et cetera, to deliberately exclude, or were created to exclude, organic, perennial, regenerative, and Indigenous managed lands. And I saw that last year and I couldn't unsee that. And I knew if I just took a job with anybody, I'd be, no matter who, I would probably be asked to drop that. And as I mentioned, I couldn't unsee it, so I haven't dropped it. And it's under that lens that I'll be talking to you today. So I'll pass it on to my fellow panelists. Andrea, please. Thank you.
Hello, can you? Definitely. Ani woju, wasno de koi Indigenous kas, wakanaka sing Odawa in the dojaba, makwa nadodum. So I'm Andrea Pierce. I live in Ypsilanti, but Ypsilanti, Michigan, which is near Ann Arbor in Michigan. But my people are from Harbor Springs, Petoskey area, so they're up towards the top of Michigan, not crossing the bridge. And I am named Northern Lights Woman. So I have been fighting a pipeline, me and my friends and everybody I meet, really. We converse and then they come to my side because we don't like pipelines, we really don't. We live in a, you saw in the video that was the world's largest pipeline spill was in Michigan. And we have another one that's up crossing the Straits of Mackinac, which is 70 years old. They're only supposed to last 50, but they're like squeaking it through. And by squeaking it through, I mean they're pushing through 20 million gallons of oil a day. That's squeaking it through. Yeah, it's just disgusting. I'm part of a team that we discovered a 10,000-year-old sacred site on the bottom of the Straits of Mackinac. We rented a submarine and that didn't work out, so we bought an ROV, hooked it onto a Gmon, which is a canoe that holds like 12, 14 people. And we went out to Lake Michigan and Lake Huron, and we worked that ROV, and we found a 10,000-year-old sacred site that all 12 of my tribes in Michigan have claimed as indigenous sacred site. So we're hoping that will help stop the building of a tunnel, because they're trying to build, Enbridge is trying to build a tunnel underneath the Straits of Mackinac. And they're talking about hydro drilling, which is like with a great big diamond tip and just drilling under there and pulling all that out into the water, which will destroy the water. So we're trying to fight that. They want to house the electric, the gas, and cable, probably everything through that thing once they get it in there. Me personally, I think an electric cable and a gas pipeline is not a good idea. I don't see how a company that operates illegally and does everything incorrectly and doesn't report it properly can do anything correct. I'm currently chair and co-founder of a caucus in the Democratic Party. We were watching DAPL and what happened at Standing Rock, and we had been protesting in the streets. That's how I started off, was an in the streets activist with signs and a megaphone. And I saw that it wasn't working, right? They built the Dakota Access Pipeline and they ran it through until it exploded and stopped then. But what happened is that I was like, we got to do something else. This is not working. We have camps all over the place and this is just not working. So we built a caucus. I call it Friends of Mine, and we built a caucus. We're working for political power. So what we did was we got a governor now who said she'll shut down Line 5. We got an attorney general who said she'll shut down Line 5. We have 2 lawsuits now, one in the state and one in the federal to shut down Line 5. Right now, Enbridge is operating illegally in my territories because the governor pulled their easement and their eviction. So they've been evicted, but they're still pumping. So now I'm talking to like Earth Justice and different lawyers and asking them, why are they allowed to do this? And it's probably because of the federal case. So once it pumps back down, everybody should jump on them, I hope. So that's part of the fight that we're working on. Also, there's PFAS in our water. What was it, 3M is in Wisconsin and it came through our waters and it's poisoning us. PFAS is in the Teflon pans, the non-stick. You squirt it on your shoes, it's waterproof, on your Scotch Guard. They put it in our pizza boxes, but it's also used in firefighting foam, which is usually on airports, military bases will have it. So we're working on fighting that, trying to make laws against it. My mother recently passed away in September from PFAS poisoning. Our little town of like 1,500 people is on one of the 200 sites and listed on Michigan for PFAS contamination. So now they've made it personal. We're coming for them. We're doing everything we possibly can. They've joined different groups that are working against PFAS. So my day is pretty busy. And I have a lot of family and friends that work with me. I don't do anything by myself. There's a whole group of us, bunches of groups fighting and working together and talking. And that's where, for me, the allyship comes in because, there's 12 tribes, but my tribe's only about 3,000 people. And there's the biggest tribe is Sault Ste. Marie, and they probably have like 8,000. So it's not huge. We don't talking about huge amounts of people. The assimilation and genocide really took care of that, and that's how I feel about this PFAS. This is another form of genocide. So we're rising up against that, And I got my family, my friends, and my allies, and we're all working together. And I think it's really important that we keep working together. I recently got a new job, and I retired. Do you believe that? To get this new job. And I work for MEJC, which is the Michigan Environmental Justice Coalition. I figure I can do a lot more work working with an environmental justice coalition than on my own or with the caucus. Although the caucus has been bringing a lot of political power, we are making it count. We have endorsement process, and in there is where you're taking money from. If you're DTE or Enbridge, I'm not going to support you. This caucus will not support you. Are you supporting Line 5 and or the tunnel? Yeah, guess what the answer to that will be. If you're supporting it, nope, you don't get our endorsement. And labor has been against it. They've added questions about Line 5 on there. So if you support it, they will endorse you. So we're up against labor, which has, you know, big bunches of money, but they don't have people with all the heart. And I think that's what's going to win, is the people with the heart who really care.
My name is Steve. Whoa. Hello? Yeah.
You gotta talk kind of close.
My name is Steve Cornell. My people are settlers, mostly English, some French, some Dutch. I'm recently retired, partly retired, I should say. My wife says I need lessons in retirement from the University of Arizona, and I've spent my career entirely working with and for Native nations in North America and in Australia and in Aotearoa, New Zealand, on governance and development issues and related policy matters. I spend about half the year in Tucson, Arizona, where I live on the traditional lands of the Tohono Nation, and the other half in Montana, where I live on traditional lands of the Apsalaka Nation, the Crow tribe of Montana. And very glad to be here today and have a chance to think about these alliance issues. Thanks.
Hello. First of all, I want to say good afternoon or good evening, or what I want to state in my Yucatecan language is Uts Chinilkin. That's basically good evening, you know. So my name is Narciso Torres. I'm a master forest gardener. I am taking care of whatever plants that are endangered and in my country, and I'm trying to make a difference in preserving the endangered species, because we need them just like we need them and they need us. So I'm encouraging people from all walks of life to have more love for Mother Earth, because from Mother Earth we got everything that we need to keep living. And if we don't take care of it, well, you know, we'll be endangered. We are endangering ourselves by taking everything that the Creator gave us, and we don't supposed to take it for granted. You know, we need to have more respect for Mother Nature, because Mother Nature is so loving that it's keeping us alive up to this moment, and we need to have a lot of appreciation for Mother. And I am encouraging people of all walks of life to see that you have more than one kind of plant, or have a diversity, because having a diversity is the way that the world will continue. Because if by losing diversity, the world will not be the same again. I hope everybody will do their share and make a difference for the future generation to come. Thank you.
Hello? Takes a while. Hello? My name is Anabel Ford, and I liked our introduction. The man said, this is Mr. Steve Tamayo said, we are of the two-legged nation, so I will be of the two-legged nation, which includes all of us. Building alliances is something I have done throughout my career, and Narciso is one of the examples of learning by allying between indigenous and non-indigenous people. I'm an archaeologist, and my mission is to explore solutions past, and being focused on the ancient Maya, I believe that you couldn't establish a major civilization without having it sustainable, and it's through working with people, my allies like Narciso, collaborators, that I have learned how the Maya did it. So that's my arena.
OCO, Brendan Cobb, Odawa, Oklahoma, Dedega, Chichilegi. What I said to you all is hello, everybody. My name is Brandon Cobb. I'm from Oklahoma, and I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. Yeah. Shout out to my relative Jesse. And I come from a long line of Cherokee ranchers, and I'm a land steward and a wildland firefighter, and I'm learning to be a cultural fire practitioner. And for now, I'm working with the Nature Conservancy here in Nebraska. So I work as our Indigenous Conservation Specialist, and really all that means, it's a lot of words to mean a few things, and that is utilizing the resources that we have at TNC to help support Indigenous-led stewardship in whatever way, shape, or form that looks like. And I have the privilege of working with a lot of partners all across the state of Nebraska. All of them have different desires for their lands. And we take a bit of a backseat, listen, learn, and figure out where we plug in. So thanks all for sticking it out.
Thank you all for the introductions. Obviously, we have great amount of experience on this panel, and we want to start off with Dr. Narciso Torres and Dr. Ford on regenerative farming, and talk about that allyship before I kick it off with one question and then open it up to the audience.
Well, one of the things we thought about was that climate change is one of the major issues that everyone is going to be facing. And 10,000 years ago here and other places, or maybe 20,000 years ago, it was an ice age. So we're not going to stop climate change, but we can build systems of resilience and look to systems that are successful in adapting. And I don't know if you can bear to see a few slides that Narciso could annotate about the milpa cycle, because we are in a temperate zone, and it might be helpful to look at the heroes of the Maya forest who are actually building a perennial regenerative system that starts with 4 years of an open milpa with crops, and moves into succession of early perennials, and matures into, in the average of 20 years, into a system that is very much looks like a forest. Can we see the next slide? So this is you want to talk about perennial forest? This is a perennial forest. It's hard for him to see, I think. Can you look at the Zacarias?
Yeah.
What tree is that?
That's a mahogany tree.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that once we have large trees, enough large trees, we are reducing temperature. We are increased biodiversity. We conserve water. We build more fertile soil, um, we stop erosion by having more trees.
Can we have the next slide? What's the home garden? How do they, home gardens, the way I have envisioned the Maya forest land uses, they'll have home gardens which have sort of a system of milpa, open and mature areas, but then their fields are farther away. Narciso, when you're driving in to the village where he lives, it's the only one that has trees all over. What kinds of trees do you have? Mango and
Well, it's a fair amount of trees that I will mention some. I will maybe not be able to mention everything because I need to write it down. But I will tell you, I have mango trees, I have sweet sap, I have sour sap, I have custard apples, I have avocados, I have guavas, I have chestnut, bread nut trees, zapadillas, cacao, coffee, sugarcane, bananas, plantains, chives, onions, beans, corn.
List goes on.
It's a fair amount that if I need to mention, I will can't do that because I need to write it down. How much I got? It's a fair amount. It's over 100 in 5 acres. I have some that amount. I also have mahogany cedars and other lumbering trees too that I am growing for the future generation to have like a bag of seeds that people might collect in the future to have to make it to propagate. And I am giving away seedlings. It's not for sale. It's for giveaway because I feel that Mother Earth needs more trees to keep life going on and keeping the earth more cooler.
So the next slide. This is the milpa. This is a field. Now it might look like it's dead, but if you look carefully, how to say it's broken.
Bend over.
They bend and break the corn cob so that it will be not collecting water, and it's a way of storing it temporarily before they collect it. And those are beans growing up the stalks and coming into the next phase of the milpa. Because that would be you would have 2 milpas, right?
Yeah.
Two plantings.
We have sometimes we have more than one crop growing between the rows of corn. We might have a plant that we call jicama, but on the root of the corn we got the beans growing on. After we harvest the corn, the beans will take over, and then we'll have a second crop because the beans take longer than some beans will take longer than the corn that we plant. So we'll have a next crop to reap in maybe in a month and a half more or 2 months. But in between that rows of corn, we have more other crops that we are expecting to have in half a year. For example, we have a row of jicama or yams that will be growing there, or other. We'll put some other trees that will be big trees in the future. So it's a place where sometimes I tell people be careful how to walk in here because every meter, every square feet or whatever, there is something there.
Yeah, this is a multi-crop system, definitely not a monocrop system. The next slide. This is, in the second growth.
Yeah, in the secondary growth, we have trees that are growing like siricote. That's what my friend is pruning there. But then sometimes when we don't want the tree for lumber, we will do pruning, so the tree will grow long enough to produce lumber. But that tree produces some nice fruit to make some sweets like jams, and the nuts are inside are edible too. So it's food at the same time.
Next slide. So as I've been working in this alliance with my collaborators, the Maya Forest Gardeners, I redrew this as a image that you can find in National Geographic that suggests this is how the Maya used the land. But if you used it that way, you wouldn't have water, you wouldn't have good soil, what were the things you had here? The temperature would be very high. And in fact, the milpa cycle, which has the perennial component, also produces things for building houses. So that situation would not be very good. But if they could just quickly go 1, 2, 3 for the next slides, you can start imagining. It's a little bit of a animation of how this area, all areas are useful. It's not like the idea of shifting agriculture. It's not the situation where the rest of the landscape is wasted, which is what the Western view was. And I almost think that this was some of the problems with those, the Dawes Act, that they saw people working in one area and they said, okay, we'll give you this and take this and give it to someone who won't be wasting it, not realizing that the whole landscape was what was necessary. So this is a concept of regenerative agriculture that I think can be applied in other places as well, by remembering the perennial component. Okay. Thank you.
Apologies for having my back towards you. Oh, it's off. I'll speak louder. Oh, there it is. That was really loud. Sorry for having my back to the panelists. The other mic isn't working quite well. But one question that I'll quickly ask on allyship, and then I'd love to have audience questions. We see the diverse projects and an immense amount of knowledge that you have on this panel and that you've talked about. And with that, you have gotten to know the community, you know, the traditional and current practices of indigenous communities you work with. What would your advice be to individuals here today interested in supporting the indigenous communities and efforts you are involved in? And whoever would like to speak first, go ahead.
I'll give it a shot. It's an interesting question, and that just recently I've had a sort of peripheral experience dealing with it, because universities across the country are developing policies for dealing with indigenous issues. And this has been happening over the last few years, and at the University of Arizona, I remember an email that came around sometime this past year saying, if you're going to be working with an indigenous community, you need to go through a training program that's offered by some outfit, I don't know who they are, in cultural competence and cultural sensitivity. And I remember my reaction to that. I mean, those sound like very good things. I'm not quite sure what they mean by cultural competence. It strikes me that if you want competence in a culture other than your own, you'd better live in it for a while. And a training program is not going to do much for you. Cultural sensitivity, okay, great. But if you really want to work with an indigenous nation in any of the 4 countries that I've worked in, what you really need is a course in sovereignty training, or political sensitivity, or something that encourages you to think of this not as just another interest group with a problem that you might be able to help with, but to realize you're dealing with nations that have governments, that have histories of successful policy making long before Europeans ever showed up on this continent. And if you don't go into the relationship with that perspective, all the cultural sensitivity in the world isn't going to help you actually be helpful to them. So it seems to me when you're thinking, particularly for Indigenous nations who are thinking about alliance, finding allies, and Indigenous nations, we all need allies, whether you're Indigenous or not. It's hard to gather in this contemporary, very fast-changing and difficult world, to gather the expertise. And I think Indigenous nations who are trying to reassert self-governing power and reclaim their rights to make decisions for themselves on everything that matters to them, many of them have limited resources with which to address very complex issues. So you look for allies, but the allies you look for need to be allies who have that understanding of who you are. And so I think that's a critical piece of that kind of work. And the other thing, and this maybe is for academics in particular, we tend to go into issues with our own intellectual agendas. Gee, I've been interested in such and such for a long time, and I think I'll go work with the community and see what I can learn about it. You've got to set that aside. The only agenda that matters is their agenda. And the question is, can you marshal the sorts of resources that you have in the way of skills or data or experience or the resources of a research university, which are substantial and can be used for very good purposes. The question is, can you marshal those resources to actually be helpful in the Indigenous nations agenda, not your agenda? So I think those are the two issues that I would offer.
Another note that I would add, along with sovereignty and the resources and all of that, is the importance of trust within Indigenous communities, where, it doesn't matter how many resources you throw at the problem. If there is no trust, there is no relationship. If there is no relationship, there is no good work. And so I think for a lot of groups, when they think of allyship, they think, well, what program do we need to develop to work with Indigenous and tribal communities? And they work hard and they concoct something in-house, and then inevitably it fails. And the reason it fails is because they spent all that time thinking about it internally. They didn't go out, they didn't listen, they didn't spend time in community. And so my encouragement for all of the folks here that are interested in being an ally, it means taking time out of your day to go spend a day on the reservation. It means meeting tribal people where they are, wherever that is, whenever that is. It means freeing up your calendar and not going to a meeting because you're gonna have lunch with someone that day, and that's a relationship building exercise. And at least in my experience, those types of things have gotten, the work that I hope to achieve of empowering Indigenous people in terms of land management so much farther than it would have anywhere or any way else. So that trust building component is paramount, I would say, to almost everything else.
Yeah, I wanted to address the sovereignty also. When you're dealing with tribes, you're dealing with like their own countries, their sovereign nations. You have to remember that. I come from Little Traverse. That's a nation, a whole country of our own, and we may not get along with the next nation that's next to us because of whatever reason. So that's something you have to realize too, is that just because they're tribes or Indians, that we're different. Okay, we're not gonna it's not cookie cutters, we're all different. We have to remember that also. And when you walk into a group of us to help us, let us lead. Okay, we are being guided by culture and tradition, and we need to be the ones in the front doing the work, along with everybody, but let us lead. If you go into help the natives and then you get to an event and you and your friends are the only ones there, you didn't lead us, and we all silently left. And I've seen that a lot. That happens. We have to be heard, right? We need to be listened to. When we say we need ABC, don't come back with Z, Y, and X, because that's not going to help us. And we're just looking, okay, what am I going to do with this? Okay, and put it aside and move on, right? And you're sitting there, oh, I help the Indians, and we're like, what the heck happened? But we do. We are guided by traditions. We're guided by culture. I will, you know, some things will happen, and I'll be like, okay, let me just stop for a minute, and I'll go and I'll take time, and I'll go and, you know, smudge like we did this morning, and I'll cleanse myself and get rid of all of the bad mojos and negativity that's jumping on me, and I'll sit back and I'll take a deep breath and I'll pray for guidance, and I'll come up with something, and I'm like, thank you. You know, it came to me. Well, this is what we're supposed to do. And I'll come out with them crazy idea, and they look at me like I'm nuts. All right, if that's what you want. I mean, you should have seen them when we talked about going under line, you know, the Straits of Mackinac on a submarine, or I took an ROV to a canoe, you know, and I called people up. It was a big secret. We couldn't tell people what we were doing. I literally called people up that I know and said, you know who I am, you know what I'm working for, this is what I need. And they said, okay, you got it. Because I couldn't say, oh, we're going to take down Emmerich, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to go take pictures of Line 5. No, we couldn't say that. We had to keep it quiet. And that's what works, you know, listening. Build that trust, like you said. But remember, we're being guided differently. I'm wired differently than a lot of my friends, you know, and that's normal for me. You know, I think differently. I was raised differently. It's kind of odd when you go into a room of people and there's like 100 or so people, and I may be the only Indigenous person there. You know, I mean, how many times has that ever happened to any of you? You know, you walk in and that's it. Yeah, you're the only one. You know, and people say things and they're talking amongst themselves, and you know, you're sitting there like that big green thumb, you know, because okay. But that's what we deal with, and that and the genocide. We're still coming out of the boarding school, you know, residential boarding schools. My family went to them. My brother and sister went to residential boarding schools. My partner was in one. My grandma, my grandpa, my uncles, my aunts. So that's part of my history, our generational trauma that we need to work through. But we're learning about a lot of this at the same time everybody else is. You know, 250 people found on a residential boarding school, you know, their bodies. You know, we're the only school where we don't have alumni, we have survivors, right? I mean, that's pretty twisted when you think about it. And that's what we're coming out of, right? We're learning about our history at the same time everybody else is, and we're the only ones. People look, when they come out and they ask me, what do you think about that? I say, what do you think I think? You know, this is inhumane, this is sick, this is gross, this is disgusting. Then I go out into by myself to pray and calm down. You know, and that's something we have to realize. You know, we are really going through a lot as Indigenous people. You know, you see us standing up and talking and we're calm. Our stomachs are like this, right? Because we're in a group of people we don't know, right? We got, you know, people are shooting people up now. You know, I fight a pipeline that has billions of dollars, right? They could anytime get rid of me. And I'm not putting that energy out there. But, you know, that's something that we have to be cognizant of. When we're standing in the front line, we are the targets. But we have to be there.
Okay. I know she's no longer in the room, but I would still like to express gratitude to great-grandmother Mary Lyons for her reminder that we are all in the same boat together and that humanity is what matters. And so when I'm asked the question of advice on allyship, where I tend to go in the hallways that I walk is what matters for humanity. I spent 2 decades looking at what matters for the bottom line as a means of getting people to do the thing they should be doing anyway. And so now I look for what are the common threads that we all hold that we need going forward. So for example, measuring things through the lens of only GDP, gross domestic product, economics, is not actually the best thing in service of human life going forward. It's actually biodiversity. Biodiversity is the only metric that matters at this moment in time for human life to continue on this planet. Full stop. And so in allyship, because who is managing the world's biodiversity? 80% of it? It is Indigenous people around the world that are managing 80% of the remaining biodiversity. And so when I look at the frames, the constructs, the mental puzzles that my people put on measuring climate change, on looking for projects to implement, on thinking through a bottom line mentality, I start interjecting what it means to actually include these other systems, because they are what matters most going forward. And within that, Indigenous voices can rise when they understand that their way of life is dependent entirely on yours in this moment and possibly going forward, and has always been, as has been declared from this stage. So I have a saying, every job is a climate job. I don't care who you are, every decision you're making, what job you choose to take, how you choose to spend your time at that job. You could be in procurement purchasing cups for your cafeteria. That is a climate job. What are you sourcing? How are you using that power to make as small a decision as what kind of cups you're going to have people drink out of? That is a climate decision. And so I ask people to treat that as such where I go, and help them understand that if a little white girl from one of the poorest counties in Michigan, who started off in a school of 27 and wasn't allowed to wear anything but skirts until she was 14, in an Amish community of very strict Puritan values, can stand on this stage with you and testify in front of Congress in Washington, D.C., and speak on behalf of two of the world's largest food companies, what power do you have to act from where you're at? Because I'm continuing to lean into mine and find out how far I can go in challenging the status quo. So if I can be an ally to your own work, please let me know. That is why I'm here, and I thank you again for the time.
One part of the alliance that was briefly mentioned by Stephen is what can the Academy do? Because there are things the Academy has, and I approached our Chancellor, and later I worked with Cynthia, who's over here, to talk with him more seriously about setting up a way to give an honor to Narciso Torres. I don't have a picture of the wonderful picture, but I will send it to someone so you could see. This January, the delegation came up, and Narciso Torres received the Chancellor's Medal, which for his 40 years working as a citizen scientist on my project. Not something that the university does commonly. In fact, he had never even thought of citizen scientists until we brought it up.
Well, I was so privileged to receive that honor, but I was not working for receiving honor. I was just working for a betterment of a better world for everyone. I always will do. I don't want to be a boss. I want to be a servant. That I like to serve. I don't like to be served. I like to serve. I want to continue that way for the rest of my life. And probably I should see a little of part of my life, that how I live in my little plot of garden that I live. I make a windbreaker. I would say, so like maybe lot of people know what a windbreaker is. So to stop the wind from blowing your car down. So I had a neighbor that would always tell me, "You don't know about agriculture." He says, "No, but why do you put those trees down?" So I didn't answer him, but every day when the sun is hot, he's under my shade of my trees, and I didn't say nothing to him. Neither I never tell him, "Why are you on my shade?" That is something that people sometimes just don't think about the needs of what we need in this world, because people think about only maybe incentives, how to get more incentive, but we need to take care of this world, and if we don't do, we need to week of, we need to do it today, not wait for tomorrow. Tomorrow will be too late. Thank you.
We have one question here from Renee, and then I know we have one in the back.
Okay, well, I have a comment, really. Well, one thing I do is I work as a cultural consultant, and I work with a number of organizations. The main thing when I'm working with these organizations, and usually they're non-native organizations, environmental, education, so on and so forth, and I'm an educator. But one thing I do work with them on is in creating relationships with that tribal nation or with Native people in the community. Is that the first thing is, by God, be humble. Humble yourself. And I liked what my relative Brandon said. You have to take that time. Allow for that time, because you are in our space and our time. We have to take that time ourselves to create those relationships within our own communities, with our elders, and for goodness sakes, that takes time and patience. And honor. I'm the kind of person, I'm gonna roast you. I'm not gonna hold back. When I'm working with allies who are attempting to work with Native people, I will take them through that process. Not because I just see myself as a gatekeeper. You know, I hate that word. That's a strong, thing to say, to hate something. But I don't like that. I know who I am. I know my lineage. I know my history. I know my spiritual customs from my grandmother's way. That took me over 35 years. Not some, whatever whatever years it takes to get a PhD. That makes me mad when I have allies who come in and say, I'm working on my thesis, I'm working on my PhD, and I have to do this within this time frame, and this is what I need to do, and they have a whole checklist of things they gotta do. I'm like, throw that out of here. You work on creating those relationships. You do it, or don't. I have very little patience with researchers and academicians who claim that they can work with us. If they are not willing to humble themselves intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, physically, then do not come near us. And I'm gonna call on my sister over there, because she is somebody that I've been working with in the last 2 years, and she is very humble. She has made those efforts to create those relationships. Dr. Lori Dance, please stand up. And I always advise, especially linguists who are coming in to study our languages, you go and feast the people before you study our language and take it for your own use. Any of that knowledge, that traditional ecological knowledge, is precious to us. A lot of it was taken away from us, and we're doing everything we can to get it back. What I don't like, and I'm stating this very clearly for each one of you, but for our audience, is that many of the academicians have their hands on information that even our own tribal nations do not have access to. That makes me mad. So by all means, understand the sacrifices that we have gone through, the genocide that we've lived through. My daughter, she's a survivor. She's a descendant of survivors of the Wounded Knee Massacre. That she is living and breathing at this moment, I will protect her life and my other children's life with my life. If you are serious about doing this work, then you are going to take the same measures as I would as a mother. You would lay down your life. And as to any of the academicians who are in here, who say they are good allies, when we are making these stands on the front lines like this sister here, we're putting our bodies on line and we are in danger. Where are you then? So I'm going to take this moment and say these things because they need to be said and they need to be heard. And I do speak this way, believe me, to a lot of people. So, you know, don't just rest on your laurels. You understand the sacrifices we have made in order to stand here in front of you, living and breathing at this moment. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Doctor?
Thank you, Renee. And yeah, I have watched Renee stand people down in Scandinavia. Yes, you don't mess with her. But I have a question for the academics. We recently, my colleague Christina Bratner and I, we're a member of 4 academics who are working in allyship with local Native folk in Lincoln. And we had a good allyship panel just back in May. And one of the attendants, who herself is Indigenous, Sloan Cornelius, who works in the admissions office, she said something very poignant and powerful. She said, when you try, because you know, I'm trying to change the way the University of Nebraska Lincoln, yes, I'm putting them on the loud, I will say it in front of the chancellor, interacts with Indigenous students, staff, faculty, community members. And Sloan said that, and she said it in public, so that's why I'm repeating it. She said that the University of Nebraska, when it comes to Indigenous issues, they want the tree and the leaves to be pretty, beautiful, but the roots are rotten. And they don't want to deal with the roots. So I'm asking the academics, how do I push the powers that be at my university past the beautiful tree and to really deal with the roots? Because there's so much research that goes on at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln on Indigenous issues that is extractive, that has no respect for the communities, that has built no relationships to the communities. So I'd like to hear from the academics on the panel and any other in the room, but how do we move our universities past that highly problematic behavior, especially the ones in the top positions, because I'm not afraid of them.
Boy, if I had the answer to that question, I know exactly what you mean. Universities are really good at symbols, not so good at substance. And there are places where money talks, and Indigenous issues don't have a lot of money attached to them. I think there's a difference between public universities in the US and some private universities. Recently, the Kennedy School at Harvard University has made a long-term commitment to sustained Indigenous work on governance and development issues. And I think what they've done and they've put money behind it. I think what they've done is impressive, but it's also very unusual, and it only just happened in the last 12 months. I think I wish I had a silver bullet to offer you. I don't. We, fortunately, at the University of Arizona, they've had for years a very strong Indigenous law program led by some very prominent Indigenous professors of law. And if you can get your professional schools involved in this kind of thing, that sometimes helps, because those are places that bring in money. I spent 20 years, more than that, but at different universities, close to 40 years now, working on these issues, and I've encountered everything that you've encountered. It's a long slog, and right now, a lot of universities are starting to invest in programs that move beyond simply financial aid for Indigenous students, which is the easiest thing for universities to do. Oh yes, we'll open the doors to your students and we'll even provide some financial aid. But to get them to actually redirect substantive research resources to issues that matter to Indigenous people, and to do it only because those issues matter to Indigenous nations, and not because there's big money to be made in pursuing, artificial intelligence or quantum physics or something like that. To get them to actually make those kinds of commitments is a very long journey and a very tough thing to do. I think some nations are beginning to have some impact on public universities. There are 21 nations in the state of Arizona, and the University of Arizona and Arizona State University listen to them to some degree, but getting real substantive change is a long process.
One of the things that we've been working on in Michigan is Native orgs. There's student organizations at the different colleges, and what we've been doing is ours will throw powwows or have different events, and I actually go and I volunteer and help them as an Indigenous leader in the community. And what we do is we try to get them to realize that once they graduate, they become alumni, and as alumni they have power. So that's what we've been working on, as they start talking about graduation. Don't forget, you're going to be alumni. Don't just leave us. And we cultivate that. We teach them that when you graduate, you can't just go off into your own little world again and focus on your job, because we still have these issues here, the issues that you complain about in all of these meetings, because we're trying to divest from the banks over there in Michigan because they fund pipelines, and that was one of the things that the students were working on. And another one was more recognition, because the University of Michigan states that the Anishinaabek gifted them the land that they started their schools. So we're pushing that issue. They gave us a little plaque in the middle of the road, and we're like, okay, that's a nice little start, but here's a list of issues that we have here. So, and we have those students who now graduated and are now alumni, we keep track of them. And hey, we have a problem with this. Can you come speak up? Can you send out a letter? And they do that, and it helps. It makes a difference, because they don't know the alumni's all upset. The alumni wants this. The alumni wants that. So we work on cultivating the Native students, and I do it with the environmental ones also. I find if you put yourself in those spaces where they're learning, it helps.
I'll just add quickly, not as somebody in academia, but somebody who recently left academia and recently graduated. Something that I think is important is that universities a lot of times will do kind of what Dr. Cornell was saying. They'll find money, they'll give you a stipend, they'll provide a cultural house, whatever that is. But a lot of times what ends up happening, and what really ends up hurting, is we can't actually practice our language. And that's something that we fought hard for at Yale for 4 years, and it wasn't until last year, unfortunately I didn't get to take part in it, but that the Cherokee language is finally recognized as a language you can take for credit at the university. I mean, that's just ridiculous. But I think what goes along with that is that, all that aside, I worked very hard for my education, and I came out of small town Oklahoma, and I'm very grateful to a lot of mentors and a lot of people I met through the university system that helped enable me to be up here with you all today. And what I think is really important for students, especially those who are currently going through university, is the whole concept of two-eyed seeing, especially for Native students. And so I wear these 2 rings. This ring's my graduation ring. This represents all the things I learned at school that helped me navigate the framework that I've been put into as an Indigenous person. This ring is my grandfather's ring. He got this from the Zuni tribe as a gift where he worked during his later years. And this is what keeps me grounded, right? And so the question for universities is, how do you enable students to have those two-eyed seeing learning opportunities? Unless you go to Haskell or some of your Indigenous schools, you're probably not going to get an education that is totally revolving around your culture and identity. Most students are going to go to a university that is your typical university. And there's a lot to learn there. What I will mention is, in terms of the kind of discussion of how do we cleanse those roots, I think a lot of universities think about it in the terms of, well, we just need to hire more, in this case, Indigenous people, and they'll kind of solve the problem for us. And I even see that in my own organization at times, where it's like, we just need to hire more people, and we'll just kind of send them out and they'll figure it out for us. And it just simply doesn't work that way. If universities or other organizations, if their goal is this kind of transformative change to see Indigenous people as true partners and people that can be worked with on a day-to-day basis, it has to be education that happens across the entire staff, the entire university, whatever that looks like. And so I think that's really important to remember as well.
We have one question here, and then I'll go to Sheila over on the other side.
It's been a long day and a beautiful day, and I really want to thank the organizers for the privilege and the honor to be a part of this conversation. And I want to get closer to the panelists, because my question has to do almost like our Queen Mother's own. I just need to say a little bit that for Dr. Torres to get the Citizen Scientist Award, which is a big deal, is I want to say that a lot, my being here has to do, now I realize why I am here, because a couple of years ago, the spirit of my ancestors told me to go into the sacred space of the Garifuna people for an entire year. So I sat there and it looked as if I was alone in the Dabuyeba, which we call like our sacred space. But then I realized that I was there with my ancestors, and I got the message that I need to come to the United States. I'm like, what? But anyway, I have to be obedient to the spirit calling. And now I know why. In the height of COVID, I traveled to 20 plus cities in the United States to learn and to understand. And I was saying to my colleague, Dr. Ford, I said to her, I have to go there because I need to understand how systems work in the United States. Because when researchers come to our country, we have absolutely no reference point of where you're coming from. So I need to go into your space to understand why it is you need to come into my space and what it is you are receiving. So it was a powerful experience for me to come to universities here. And I was totally like, I couldn't speak for many days. In fact, one day we're walking through the university and I'm looking up at these resources, these big buildings. And I remember saying to my colleagues, wow. And I said, what do you mean, wow? I said, you have absolutely no idea the impact of being in this space, what it means to me in terms of the resources and all that you have access to. My first question has to do, and I've spoken to some of you in the room, can you share, or in your place and in your positioning, in your access to resources, can you, first of all, begin to have a state of consciousness or awareness of the impact of that power dynamic on us? That's the first. Can you even begin to interpret? When I and Dr. Torres, we went to the university, and we went into a room filled with treasures that were brought to this country from my country. And there are many universities that are custodians of that, right? So I don't want to go into that debate, except by when Sister Queen was, when they were doing the ritual, and this has to do with dreams, visions, and what someone said today about it is the time. In Garifuna we say, Shuluwa Dani. That means the time has come. The time is now, no matter what. And to my brothers and relatives and sisters here, the conversation is not just for you. The question is not just for you, it's for all of us. Because when we come to a point, when I hear that Dr. Narciso Torres has given 40 years of his life to a project, what comes through my spirit totally is that he is more than a doctor. Because if he is speaking with people who have doctorates, and he is a master, and he is a teacher, then that means he needs to be honored. So the conversation, and I have to thank Dr. Anabel Ford, because she's, I would say, the only one, or one of the few archaeologists coming to our country who would even have the conversation of honoring a master forest gardener. So I appreciate that. And that's a model for our reality, right? So we didn't ask any university to call him. We, the community, call him Dr. Narciso Torres. So I'm asking us, and I'm asking the panelists, are we prepared to define and to declare our own sovereignty? And I get this from my daughter, from my child. From my child. One day, many years ago, my daughter said to me, Mommy, stop saying that. I said, what do you mean, baby? She said, you always speak from a place of woundedness and victim when you tell a particular story. And from that, she taught me to tell the story differently and to change the narrative. Are we prepared to change the narrative? Due respect to the universities here in this country, those universities have done a lot of damage to the psyche of my people. And Dr. Anabel and I agree with it. When the question is asked, why it is we are not appreciating different types of farming models and so on, I said to her, Anabel, because our people came to your universities that did not honor our indigenous knowledge and practice, and then they want to superimpose their style. We have to do deprogramming, but that deprogramming has to be done by us, not by these universities. And therefore, I want to decree and declare that in this room is an Indigenous People University. We are the university. We are the university. You know how many people have come to me, and I had a wonderful conversation with this brother. Many people have come to me, following me, Auburn University, Tulane University, and I ask them, what's your program? And they tell me, you are my program. And they come for a week and follow me, right? So that is powerful for me, because and people from MIT and all these fancy universities, they are not my reference point at all. As an indigenous woman, as an indigenous person, my reference point is everything that we discussed in this room in the past couple of days. And therefore, I want to challenge all of us. And my question, would you support us in a journey? Every time I walked out of this room for the past 2 days, you know why? Because it's a woman from the University of Massachusetts who is working at the University of the West Indies, not understanding that there's no way she can speak on behalf of me, an indigenous woman. That's the conversation that we are having. I love you. I support you. The greatest gift that you can give us as indigenous people, I said to her as an indigenous woman, can you imagine? I don't mind sharing this with you. The University of the West Indies, they were promoting a conversation about indigenous women, tourism, whatever title. And her picture is on the flyer, and it doesn't cross her mind that something is wrong with that picture on that flyer. Something is wrong with that picture. Every time I was stepping out of here, it was a debate between me and her about the wrongness of that. I could never be on any conversation where I'm talking about somebody from Ireland and my picture on it. I'm not Irish. So, to summarize, with love and respect, are you prepared to facilitate? Because I say to professors and researchers here, I want to come and understand how to navigate these systems and how to navigate these landmines, because this here country dares to have the audacity to make decisions about people in other parts of the world. When I sit down and I listen to the indigenous and African American story, I realize that my calling to be here is to affirm my relatives here. I tell the African American people, it was the African American women who in the time of enslavement were sent to Belize to be missionaries and minister to the Garifuna people, because the white Catholic Church could not send white people to us. And I want to thank the African American people. But do the African American people recognize that you are the missing piece of the puzzle in the conversation? When the African American people get it, the whole world will get it, not from a perspective of victims, but as a perspective of victors. Many questions, right? So I am focusing on positioning, telling the story differently, changing the paradigm, acting and stepping into the power where you will come respectfully to us and acknowledge that we are professors, that we are lecturers, that we are experts, that we are researchers, not we running after your universities. Due respect, men. And it's the Garifuna in me that speaks. Because for us, education is not going into these buildings. Education is Dr. Narciso Torres, master citizen scientist. And that became about, because I, as an indigenous woman, opened my big mouth and dared to say he's a doctor. And everybody in our community started to call him a doctor. I, as an indigenous woman, opened my big mouth and spoke to the chancellor of the university without fear, without favor, and he said yes. So I'm asking, are you prepared to partner with us in a conversation where you come to our table? Are you prepared to throw away all those rules and all those regulations and all those boundaries and all those barriers to say yes? Are you prepared? My husband, Harriet Topsy, I didn't know until after he died that he was one of the few archaeologists of color, not only in Belize, but in the Americas. I have never met one indigenous or African American archaeologist or anthropologist coming to Belize. Are you prepared? If you are, let's have this conversation moving forward. Just so I sign an agreement just now, right? That's the biggest agreement I would like us to sign, that we can have a conversation. So when you come to Belize or when you come to the Caribbean, you come humble as a student, putting away all those underlying assumptions, all those paradigms of the dominant culture that believes that your way is the only way. And I'm not talking personally about you and this panel, right? But I've been in and out of this room having that battle with a woman from the University of Massachusetts questioning the truth and substance of an indigenous woman. Are you prepared to join us? Seremeni Ebo, thank you.
Thank you. Passing it on to Sheila.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Cynthia. I, for one, am glad you have a big mouth. We need that. Okay. I'm going to have a medium mouth for this. So, first, I have 2 comments. The first one is on the intersection of disability politics and indigeneity. And then the second one is both a comment and a question regarding performative allyship. So, first, as far as what I mean when I say disability politics is mental health and physical health have always been gate-kept and set at standards of whiteness and set by standards of white-centric medicine. I don't even say Western anymore. I say it's white-centric. My people are from the Southwest. We are Western. We get to be Western too. But in any case, because of that, a lot of indigenous traumas and traumas of other people of color go unrecognized as legitimate traumas. I was talking earlier about how the desecration of land should be considered a trauma in and of itself, and that is something that isn't done. If you, as a student, and because I'm going back to the university question on how universities can help support indigenous students, broaden your definitions of what is a socially acceptable reason to have a mental health breakdown. if in most cases, I mean, some people have really awful professors, so not all cases, but in most cases, if you go to a professor and you say you had just lost a loved one, you're more likely to get an extension. There's an understanding that this is a socially acceptable reason for you to not be functioning at your peak performance. We don't get that for when a new pipeline is opened. We don't get that for when we see reports on how much PFAS and uranium is in our waters. Right. So, indigenous... So broaden your definitions of what is socially acceptable. Take some time to educate yourselves on indigenous traumas. And for the love of God, get at least one university therapist who knows the bare minimum of what blood quantum is. Like, that was an interesting therapy experience, but in any case. I mean, I've had white therapists who I was trying to talk to about racial trauma because a lot of the trauma that I have has to do with intergenerational trauma and the abuse that gets passed down from that. And I'm mixed. My mom's white, my dad is Cherokee Apache. And I was talking about that, and this guy goes, but people don't think you're Native, do they? You don't look like anything. You're almond skinned, but that could be anything from the Caribbean to the Pacific. And I think at that point I blacked out whatever else he was saying. But that's how it ended. And these are sometimes the only resources we have. We're told to go seek mental health for mental health therapy, and these are the resources we get, and it's like, I need therapy from my therapy.
Agreed.
And that's real. And my stories on that are on the much more mild end because I had at least some access and some vocabulary because I'm one of the articulate ones. And I'm able to at least express in their language what I need and what's wrong. So, to support Indigenous students, that cannot be done without giving due respect to mental health issues and broadening what is considered disability, what is considered mental health, and you do not need to necessarily identify yourself as disabled to have a disability. I keep my beads in the empty bottles of my PTSD meds. I do not consider myself disabled, but PTSD is definitely a disability. Moving on from that, because this leads into the next bit about performative allyship. We're dealing with a lot. I just said an awful lot. Everyone in this room over the last 2 days has said several novels worth of just kind of anecdotes and allusions to serious traumas. And when we see performative allyship, that just adds insult to injury because we are already walking with that. We're already waking up in the morning in a country that would rather have us be dead, that sees our existence as an inconvenience. We are walking to work, we're getting catcalled in the street, we're being called racial slurs. And honestly, I think that misogyny and sexism and catcalling, that's another form of racism because that's just white-centric, patriarchal degradation of women. We are already dealing with a lot. I'm not even getting into the other forms of financial abuse, memories, whether or not you've had an argument with maybe one of the only family members you still have contact with that day. We're already carrying a lot.
Yeah.
So if we then go into a university space where we are doing what you wanted, we are abiding by your systems, we are succeeding by your metrics, and if we get into a university and all I am getting is this half-assed land acknowledgement about what land they're on and they're not going to do anything about it, that is performative allyship. And what I think at that is my ancestors did not survive genocide to feed your ego.
There you go.
My job description does not include whoring out my indigeneity to feed your ego. And that is what performative allyship feels like. That is what we have to spend time healing from in addition to everything else. Because we thought we had friends and it turns out we didn't. Everyone can understand how awful that feels when you think you had a friend and then they do something to betray you. That is what performative allyship feels like. So the question I have for the panel and honestly for everyone, because all of us are allies to someone who has an identity that we don't have. So this is applicable to each and every single one of us. What motivates your allyship? Are you an ally because you feel like it's something you ought to do to be a good person? Are you an ally because you want to save people? Are you an ally because you view people as equals and you want to, just as another human, collaborate with them? Because you want to learn from them. You can't study Indigenous peoples, you learn from us. So, ask yourself, what is motivating your allyship? Look long and hard. If you're just talking to yourself, no one else is going to hear it, so you can be as harsh and as critical and reveal as many ugly truths as you want. That's the beauty of interrogating yourself. So yes, remember to ask yourself what motivates your allyship. That's it.
There you go. Does anyone on the panel want to respond? Have comments?
Love. Love is the only thing that can overcome that level of trauma. And so allyship should be a place of love. And if it's not, it will be performative. That's all I have to say.
And speaking of love, I think there's, a lot of people who, if you are Indigenous, might be able to relate to this. My mother grew up in Zuni, and similar to what was discussed yesterday, had a lot of trauma growing up. So when I popped out of the womb looking the way I do, she was like, thank God I don't have to tell my son he's Indigenous. It wasn't until I was in middle school and she started taking me to the Indian clinic that I was like, what is going on here, guys? Like, what? Why am I here? And that's kind of what started my journey towards learning who I am. And when I got to the Nature Conservancy, I was trying to answer that exact same question of like, why am I at the Conservancy? Why do I not work for my own tribe? Why don't I work for a tribally owned nonprofit? And I mean, some of those questions are still true, right? But as I started to do this work and talk to my family about it, my mom has still been very shut off to this day about her upbringing. And I visited home and I came in one day and she was wearing all of this beautiful turquoise jewelry. And I go, Mom, I've never even seen this stuff. Where have you been hiding this? This is nice. And she said, you know what? Now since I see that you're doing this work and you're proud of who you are, it's made me proud of who I am. And that is what has driven me by and far every day since then. So it really does. It stems from that love, whether it's for, you know, a blood relative or a friend or whoever it is, that is where it starts. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, I think Tina is onto something critical there. And in some ways, I think that applies to my own case. I was asked to be an ally by several people who meant a great deal to me when I was a lot younger than I am now. And I think after a lot of experience working with them and with people they connected me to, I discovered that it was probably the most positive use I could make of the few skills and emotional power and brain power that I have. So I've kept doing it. But it started when, a long time ago, someone said, I wish you'd work with us. And so I did. But I think eventually what Tina mentioned becomes the heart of it. And if I'm asked to stop doing it by Indigenous people, I would. I mean, what else would you do?
I believe that in this, what my friend was talking about, I think every race, Indian or whatever Indian race, have gone through many turmoils and tribulation, but like I always will say, we need to let go the goat. Don't tie it, just forget it and forgive, because in this life we need to start forgiving, not condemning, not judging no one, live freedom, live in freedom, make your spirit live in freedom. Don't tie the goat close by, just let it go away and have a better life for the future, for your future. Thank you.
I agree about the love, but I also think we need to have hope. I think that it's got to be better than this. If we band together and work together and care and use this love, we have hope for a better future. We don't have to have it like this where you can't do anything, can't go anywhere, somebody's all the time mistreating you and you come home feeling just crappy. We can make this better. We have to. We got 7 generations coming and we have to make it better for them. At the root of everything that my family works at is that 7 generations. We have to have love and we have to have hope and we have to just power through it and make it better. We can't leave it like this. There's a lot of work to do on all fronts. Everybody is overworked. So we need to give each other's hugs and, you know, a kind word here and there. And you can do this. You know, I support you. I'm with you. We got to have love and hope.
I have sort of a different story. I didn't know that I was building allies. I just, I guess I appeared, as Cynthia says, just on the scene, but wanted to understand how the ancient Maya might have actually sustained their life, and people came forward to help me, and the allyship evolved.
I am.
Well, just a brief expression of gratitude to Ambassador at Large Cynthia and also Sheila for expressing what we all feel and needs to be said and needs to be heard. In our worldview as the Maya, we talk about creating harmony, and I think it goes to what Tina was saying, just that love and care. And we also talk about equilibrium, and you cannot have any of that without justice. We can love each other. We can definitely love each other, but justice needs to come first. And I believe that intellectual honesty will take us there. We're getting there. The conversation, just having this conversation is important, but let us not, in Maya worldview and spirituality, equilibrium means justice. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Saul Lopez, and I am a native Zapotec from a very far away land in southern Mexico, and I had the privilege to attend this summit today, and I want to thank Luis for inviting me today. I believe that native cultures are going to be the future of our generation. I do not know when, how, but I do believe in the Creator's spirit. And I believe that whatever conception you have, and I highly respect all of them, I believe that there is justice coming. I believe that there will be somewhere in the future an opportunity to see that justice will be fulfilled. But sometimes our picture of justice is not equal to what the Gray Spirit has in mind. So still, we will have justice. And I just want to make sure that we remember that we need to keep hope. I believe in the spirit of the Golden Eagle. I believe that the Golden Eagle brought me here to Omaha to meet the Omahans. I believe that there is opportunity. I believe that there will be opposition. I've seen opposition. I know that what rejection looks like. I know what abuse looks like. Not only here, but in everywhere. But there is hope. There is hope that the spirits that guard us, our ancestors, nature, is keeping an eye on us, and we're responsible. And I just want you to be reminded that everything we do, we have to create harmony in everything we say and everything we do. So do not lose hope. Do not let pain control your mind. There is hope coming.
Can I add one thing? It was mentioned earlier by Cynthia about the science and how we're not keep going with it. I don't know if everybody's aware, but last year, President Biden signed an executive order that brings up Native Indigenous culture and traditions is considered science, which we knew all along. But we can use this in arguments now against the Army Corps of Engineers and any other entities. It's the ITEC, I-T-E-K. And we all need to know about it. We all need to be able to say, according to this, and smack it down and give them the truth. So I just want to make sure that everybody is aware that we do have that resource now.
So I know we are up on time, but I do want to give panelists one last opportunity to respond or comment on allyship in general in non-Indigenous and Indigenous communities.
Well, my last comment will be in some words in my native language. I will say in Kat Tulakaresh. That means I love you all.
Well, what better end note than that?
I really can't talk.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
Ask for what you need. Ask us for what you need. I am currently working in service of Indigenous people who have asked me for what they need. And I think that Dr. Cornell stating that was also important. Let us know. Thank you.
I want to thank all the panelists. Please, a warm round of applause for them. And I also want to thank all the women who made the comments and the hard questions. I think that's so very necessary, started by Renee. And I just want to make a quick comment about how I was here last year and Renee had a question similar to many of you, and asked, where are the women when talking about food sovereignty? And to that, and to now leading a whole summit on rematriation, I mean, my complete compliments to all of your leadership, Renee. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Is on?
And I told him that. I sit there with a pad of paper and I take notes. I said, because I know you're saying something, and eventually, I said, I may not understand it now, but I know it's going to come back. Oh, Luke said this.
Test.
So I did through my notes.
Okay, family, after such a deep conversation, can we all stand? I just feel like we need like a gathering or a something. It was a very, very hard conversation. So if we could just take a couple deep breaths, if any of you know, one love, let's get together and feel all right. Again, one love, let's get together and feel all right. And I just wanted to close with it. The higher you build your barriers, the taller I become. The more you take my life away, the stronger I become. Deny my place in time, you squander wealth that's mine. My light will shine so brightly it will blind you, because there is something inside so strong. I know that I can make it Though you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone. Oh no, something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong. Sarah May.
Thank you so much. I think it's time to eat, and we already had the morning prayer. I think all we'd need is just a spirit plate. So, and we can send that out as, you know, after we're done eating. But that's all we need. Everybody looks, you know, like you're ready to eat. Elders first, please, by all means. And as we say in the Omaha language, walataya. Eat, everyone, go eat. So that's a command. Walataya, go eat.